Hello, people of YouTube. This is Gray's Guitars. I am Steve Gray, and thank you for watching. Today we're going to be talking about a millennial who owns some of the world's rarest guitars and how this particular gentleman came to acquire these guitars. Now, a lot of people say, oh, millennials don't like the older style. No, millennials don't really care about these vintage guitars owned by these old famous people because they want more modern guitars with more modern musicians. You can think of things, I guess, like Machine Gun Kelly, Phineas Eilish, if I'm saying is correct, Billie Eilish's brother there, things along those, Taylor Swift, if you will, things along those lines, the new quote-unquote guitar heroes, not the old guitar heroes. So let's go ahead, take a gander at this here article and go from there. Before we get started, though, if anyone knows how to straight plug in a 3.5 millimeter headphone or microphone rather into a PC, because I do have a new desktop now, and just get it to work, that would be greatly appreciated if somebody could comment or give me a link to an article explaining how to fix that. Updated my drivers, tried to run tests on the microphone itself, and at this point in time I'm actually having to go back to using my cell phone to record the audio as I normally do with these videos. I want to try something new, but you try, you get annoyed with it, and then you move on to something else. But enough about that, let's read this article. Meet the millennial who owns some of the world's rarest guitars. There aren't too many 25-year-olds. Keep in mind this looks like from 2019. This is a rather old article, so this guy should be about 28 now. Who can tell you what it's like to buy a 1950 Les Paul from Joe Bonamassa, or pull guitars out of their collection that were formerly owned by Jimi Hendrix, Paul Kozoff, and Jeff Buckley. Join us as we spend a surreal 24 hours in Paris with Matthew Lucas. Matthew, I'm going to say his name is. Begins in late November on a rainy morning in Paris. The previous day has almost been a write-off, fog including flight cancellations, delays. Let's skip this because we don't really care. After falling to the Paris traffic again and arrive back for breakfast, we make our apologies to our driver and head southwest. Let's not care about that either. Let's see. Near priceless pieces of rock history have become everyday occurrences for our host. Sorry, I'm skipping around because I don't care about the fluff of this. Let's get into the meat. And who are you, they ask? Aging rock stars with a vault full of stored gear and shady anecdotes to match, members of the French business elite who have chosen to invest their euros in an ever-appreciating stock of golden-era Gibson Fenders. The reality couldn't be more from the truth. Those of you who spend far too much time looking at other people's guitars on the internet may already know that Matt's Guitar Shop on Instagram, the account of self-confessed guitar addict Matthew Lucas. Lucas is the owner and curator, along with a store manager, Max Borenu, of a collection that's been amassed by buying and selling primarily in the digital domain. Although the pair are currently on the lookout for a showroom in central Paris, developing a business online first before investing in bricks and mortars has become a familiar story in recent years, but the most startling fact is that Matt is just 25 years of age. So probably he got into crypto or stocks or something along those lines. Let's read on. He'd be forgiven for thinking that an inheritance or lottery win can be the only explanation for someone who's so young being in possession of treasure trove of gear, but Matt simply traded his way up. Oh, sweet, Trade Tuesdays. Although he admits, it's on Trogley's channel, he used to do those if you're not familiar. Although he admits to not being particularly academic, there are no doubting his entrepreneurial ways. The journey began when Matt used some of his money he made to buy a vintage Jazzmaster he'd seen advertised. Unbeknown to him, he stumbled upon a prototype worth a lot more. Matt sold the guitar to Norman's Guitars, Norman's Rare Guitars. You can look them up on YouTube too if you'd like. They got some cool videos, some neat vintage guitars. Traded up to a player-grade Burst, and it was the sale of this that allowed him to start competing in the big league and acquire such instruments as a former Bonamassa 1959 Les Paul, Jeff Buckley's Telecaster, a Hendrix Stratocaster, and much more. During the day that we spend hanging out with Matt at his place, along with Max and a trio of assistants that include a pair of Dalmatians, it feels as though we barely scratched the surface. Matt realized early on that celebrity-owned gear with provenance was a lucrative area in which to invest, as fan appeals and the artist's connection will often amplify the value of an instrument way beyond its value. Such as a Jimi Hendrix Stratocaster. The last one of those sold for, I think, like $300,000, give or take. When, a normal Stratocaster from the 60s, pre-CBS, you can probably buy one, $20,000 to $50,000, depending on the condition, if I'm up to date with that market. A remarkable 1960 Flametop 6120, formerly owned by Brian Setzer, Tal Farlow prototype Gibson signature model and gear owned by Slash, Richie Sambora, Gary Moore, Billy Gibbons, AC/DC, and many more will have to wait until another day. Across the pages, Matt takes us through some of the highlights of his guitar trading career to date. So let's take a look at Jeff Buckley's 1983 Fender USA Telecaster. Over 2 decades on from Jeff Buckley's death, at the age of just 30 in 1997, the loss of such an astonishing talent, yes, it's sad. Moving on. Although Buckley also used a Les Paul Custom and Rickenbacker, this Telecaster was loaned to him by a friend in 1991. Let's read on. The only mod he did to it was the pickguard, says Matt. It's a Carvin pickguard. The photographer who owned the guitar put that pickguard on it. Doesn't match the screw holes in the 80s. A lot of brands were making replica parts for Telecasters, but not exactly the same. So let's keep continuing here. This is a rather long article, so I'm going to skip around. When you hear the arpeggios of Grace, it's very thin and brilliant, and all that bridge, is it Hallelujah sound? Yep, let's scroll on. 1959 Les Paul Standard, aka Spot. That's a cool looking guitar. Now, would I ever purchase one? I mean, maybe if I had the money. I definitely like to play one, but I feel like spending like $250,000 on a guitar when you can buy something that pretty much sounds identical for significantly cheaper. Unless you got the money or you're emotionally attached to it, I feel like it's kind of a waste of money. But one man's opinion. Perhaps the jewel of Matt's collection is Spot, the Gibson Les Paul Standard, serial number 9/1688, with distinctive double white PAFs, an incredible top, and the unfaded dark patch of finish down at the tail end gave the guitar the nickname. Oh, I guess they're talking about that area. Although Spot has changed hands several times in recent years, been one of Bonamassa's. When Bonamassa put the guitar up for sale through, I didn't think Bonamassa sold stuff. I guess he does once in a while if he finds something better. Seat Music in Nashville. It was a guitar that I always loved, he remembers, even when I didn't know anything about bursts. When I was zero scoring with bursts and I hadn't played one, I called the guitar the double white guitar. I always loved the sound of the guitar, especially at the Borderline show, because Joe had a massive and woody sound. When Joe was playing Spot, he had the special thing that he didn't get, in my opinion, on another electric guitar, even with his other Les Pauls, Skinner or Snakebite. The neck pickup of Spot is really special. When a guitar of this stature comes onto the market, prospective buyers have to move fast. When Joe decided to sell it, I saw news that we texted each other. Matt recalls, I texted the guy who was managing the sale at Rumble Seat Music. The day Joe decided to sell Spot, it was a done deal. Joe was very patient with me. Gave me a lot of time to cover it because he knew it was going to be one of my many dream guitars I would keep and play. I think he loved the way we were as passionate about the guitar as he could be. I got some other guitars there. A Gibson Shallock lap steel, matching a 2008 prototype. The prototype was used on a road by Joe Bonamassa for a slide version of his John Lee Hooks saw. Every time I see Joe, we talk about Spot. The day I came back to France with the guitar, I immediately had to go to the French Alps for a small holiday. I could not let Spot be at home. It was impossible for me. 25-year-old admits to having played close to 200 original bursts. That's crazy. 200 original bursts. This writer is into double figures, but has a long, long way to catch up. In the light of this experience, we asked Matt what, even by the stratospherically high standards of a 59 to 60 Les Paul, makes it so different. The bursts, they have so much potential, different energy, different character. He explains it's a very personal thing. Having Spot is like a dream. I just said, one day I need to play a 59 before I hit the bucket. Now we have a Gibson Heritage 81 Flying V. There's always another holy grail, Matt affirms. It's always very tricky because if you've got the real versus that I've got, it never stops. I was lucky enough to play Rick Nelson's Explorer recently. It's really something. Kozoff Clapton's 55 Gibson Les Paul Custom. For one amazing Les Paul to another, the next instrument to be removed from its case and placed gently into the floor was Matt's 17th century home, where a personal was owned by teenage Paul Coffis prior to Free, and quite possibly traded with Eric Clapton and played on stage with Cream in 1967. That's pretty cool. Then we have the one that a lot of you are probably waiting to see is the 63 Fender Stratocaster owned by Jimi Hendrix. Let's see if we quote. From what the Providence says, it's one of his first Stratocasters. Matt says of the 1963 model, the tremolo arm was modified by him to be more playable for lefties. You can see dings along the neck from rings that appear to be from a lefty player. 1970, Jimmy gave the guitar back to the guy who owned the studio as a thank you for giving him a chance in New York City, and it was later sold to his nephew. It's such a special guitar. When you plug in and play it and enjoy it, the magic happens. And that looks like that's the writer with the Telecaster there. So it was amazing. It was cool. He's got all these cool guitars. So the gist of this is, if you got a dream, if you really want to play those vintage guitars and no one's letting you touch them, you got to find a way to do it. So, you know, see this kid here, he worked really hard. I can't even call him a kid because we're pretty close in age. He worked really hard, got the vintage guitars that he wanted, saved up for them, buy, sell, trade, all that fun jazz, and this is just a real success story of it. Pretty cool to see somebody that is actually a millennial, not a boomer, have a lot of these cool old vintage instruments, especially one that was even built by Jimi Hendrix. It's to each their own if whether or not you think these guitars are worth it with the celebrity provenance and just the age of the guitars. You know, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars here, so these are not cheap by any means of the word. But at the end of the day, do what you love, collect what you like, and just enjoy the ride. Guess that's where we're going to end it. My name is Steve Gray. This is Gray's Guitars. Thank you for watching, and as always,